a real live victim of the Civil War. Hey everybody, this is Russ from Family Tree Nuts, and here we are in Thacker Cemetery in southeast Clark County, and I'm with a very special guest. Do you want to tell them who you are?
Sue Baber-Castle, my family historian and great-great-granddaughter of this little lady we're going to talk about. Martha Susan Callahan, Buchanan, CAUDIll.
She's your great-great-grandmother.
That's right.
When was she born?
She was born in April of 1836 in Walton County, Social Circle, Georgia.
I think that's about 30 miles or so, 30, 40 miles east of Atlanta.
That's right. That's right. She would have been raised on this plantation. She was the daughter of Jacob Callahan. He was a wealthy plantation owner and also a minister. Oh, wow. And very famous in his circle of Baptist preachers.
You really have some really cool people in your family, you know, and not just Kentucky royalty, but you have a great-great-great-grandfather who was a wealthy plantation owner in Georgia.
Yeah,
that's pretty neat.
Cool. Yeah.
So she inherited, I guess, the plantation with her husband worked there too.
She married actually her first cousin, John Buchanan, and so they would have gotten land. Not only did she get land from her parents, but from his family as well. Wow. And they had two daughters. Okay. And then he went off to the war. And sadly, she lost him about 1862.
1862?
Yeah, they married in 59, and he died in 1862.
So she stayed there working in plantation, you know, with the other folks that were there. And then how did she actually... where does the story go from there?
Well, while she's there, actually, it's interesting because when Sherman came through, she would have witnessed during the 60s while the war was going on, the depot burning in her town and the soldiers coming through. There's documentation they came through that area and burned. Wow. So she would have been part of that, that experience, which I'm sure shaped her life as well. By the time the war ended, she would have lost her first husband, both her parents, a brother in the war.
Unbelievable.
Already in the war, exactly right. So she's there at their plantation, right outside of town, by herself with her two daughters. And one day, a couple of gentlemen come knocking on her door. Okay. And when she answers the door, she's greeted by a gentleman asking about wanting to speak to the lady of the house. Yeah. And she just politely tells him that she is the lady of the house.
Awesome. That's a really cool story. You know that exact story there. She was a real tall lady, wasn't she?
She was a petite little thing. He actually didn't realize she was the lady of the house because she was a short little lady with a little ribbon tied up in her hair. So she probably did look younger than her 29 years of age.
You said she's about 5 feet tall.
She was about 5 feet tall.
And she was a real live Southern Belle.
She was.
You know,
she definitely
wearing those type of clothing and things like that. And
exactly.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And who was the guy that knocked on the door?
Well, it ended up being her future husband, Shadrach Shade CAUDIll.
Awesome. Awesome.
He was 9 years younger than her.
Wow, 9 years.
9 years, yeah. She might have been a cougar. But
she said that, not me.
But anyway, or he was eligible. He was the guy that came after the war, and there weren't that many eligible soldiers. And strapping young man of like 19, 20 years old. Sure. And he stayed. He liked what he saw, and he stayed. And they married in November of 1865.
Where was he from?
He was from Kentucky. Okay. In eastern Kentucky, Letcher County boy.
Letcher County. Mm-hmm. He was one in the Orphan Brigade. He was in CAUDILL's army.
That's right.
Eastern Kentucky group of Confederates had been in many different battles and such. He actually was captured, I think, at the Battle of Dallas.
Battle of Dallas, injured and captured and surrendered there in Washington, Georgia, which was about 70 miles from Social Circle. So they would have traveled heading back home to be homeward bound and come through Social Circle coming back to Kentucky.
That's really neat. So he met her, decided to stay there and get married there and work on the plantation and such. Now they had some other folks that worked on the plantation. Who were they?
They did. Actually, Martha Susan was known to their slaves that they owned, which of course we don't agree with that, but it was part of the times that she taught them how to read, and that wasn't a very popular thing that happened back then. It was illegal, exactly right. So that's why it wasn't popular.
So she was a rebel.
She was a rebel, that's right. She minded a rebel. So, but she taught them to read, and they stayed with her. So they were more family than anything because they chose to stay with her and shade and help them run the plantation, raise cotton,
and they
try
moved
to get
them
it.
from other states with as a family group.
Exactly. Once they weren't able to make a go of it in Georgia, they ended up in Louisiana, and they moved with them.
Wow.
They migrated from Louisiana here in Kentucky. They moved with them, and ended up living basically right next door to them, which is just right around like half a mile from where we're sitting right now, and established a little community. There's a cemetery over there, and then years later, our grandparents, which would have been our grandfather would have been their grandson, would get oranges from California from some of their descendants.
Oh, that is really cool.
So they stayed connected through all those years.
That is a cool
That
story.
would have been like in the 60s and 70s even.
Right, right. So they moved to Louisiana, then they ended up moving to Kentucky, a couple different places here in Kentucky that matches her husband's shade story.
Exactly.
And
and then they landed in this area where we're sitting. Their son James built them a house, and they ended up staying here.
I think she's well known to be a very spiritual, very Christian lady, wasn't she?
She was. She was raised by very strict religious parents. Her
was
father
a
being a minister, and she carried that through. She was. They had after they married, they had 6 children of their own, and they established an altar within their home.
Wow.
That the day that she died was still there. And he wrote
an altar. You said an altar to pray at,
to actually bow down,
right
kneel down, and pray right there in the house. Yeah.
So they had lots of children, I think, didn't they?
They went on and had 6 children.
Okay.
All but 2 of them are buried here.
Wow.
We talked about William, which was their second child, that in a mining accident, and he died in eastern Kentucky.
Wow.
They came back here, but when they were in Louisiana, they had a daughter, Louisa, and she was about 12 or 13, and she passed away from hemorrhage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she was a hemophiliac. We do know that, and I believe it was quite possibly buried either in Georgia or Louisiana.
Wow.
So where we're sitting, though, actually does have one of her children, Jenny, that she had with her first husband. The oldest child that she had was Margaret, or they called her Maggie. And when they were in Louisiana, she actually met her husband down there, and she stayed in Louisiana and they ended up in Oklahoma, and she's buried out in Oklahoma. And then when they came here, so Jenny's here, their oldest boy together, James, is here, and where we're sitting is the land that James owned.
Okay.
And when he passed away, he was buried here, and it kind of started this cemetery in 1916.
Oh, wow.
So when his wife sold the land, it was sold except for the quarter of an acre that contained a cemetery.
It's over 100 years old, I guess. You weren't here then, so
no, not long after, but I wasn't here then. But then they had 3 other daughters that are buried here. There's Kayreen, Carrie, and then my great-grandmother, Evelina.
Awesome.
Who we're going to talk a little bit about, too.
So she had quite an unusual life. Born in Georgia, Southern Belle, plantation owner. War took everything from her. Moved around all over the place. Ended up living in the hills of eastern Kentucky. What a unique story that she had, and somebody you should be daggone proud of.
I am.
Kind of thing. When did she die?
She died in 1922. I believe it was like around January of 1922.
She lived a long time.
She was into her 80s.
Yeah, that's
exactly
incredible.
Right.
That's
she did.
great.
And the interesting thing, too, she was born on land that would have been part of the Indian land grants in Georgia. That's how her dad got the land in Walton County. And she ends up dying on land that ends up being Indian Oldfields, the last Indian village in Kentucky.
How about that? Yeah, start and
quite
finish
that
there.
start and finish for her life. Yeah,
really
pretty
neat.
interesting.
Really
yeah,
neat.
and Shadrach wrote. I have an article that he wrote about her, talking about her love for life and how she loved the Lord, and how it's just what she taught him how to read, and the wording on it is just so emotional and quite beautiful.
Yeah, that really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think she had quite the. She'd be one I'd love to talk to if I could go back in time and find out what she thought about the changes in her life.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least you've documented that, for all future descendants, and brought these stories forward so everybody can see them. So here we are at the gravesite of Martha Susan Callahan Buchanan CAUDILL. here in the great and Thacker Cemetery in southeast Clark County, Kentucky. A lady that saw so many changes in her life, from southern plantation owner to living in eastern Kentucky, and definitely somebody we should remember and celebrate. And hey, remember, family tree nuts. Let our nuts find the nuts in your family tree.